Welcome to China Insider, a podcast from the Hudson Institute's China Center. I am Miles Yu, Senior Fellow and Director of the China Center. Join me each week for our analysis of the major events concerning China, China threat, and their implications to the U.S. and beyond.
It's Tuesday, August 20th, and we've got three topics for Miles. First, we examine the large exodus of wealthy Chinese who are working to get their money out of China. Miles analyzes why the fearful moves are happening, where this money is going, and how people are pulling it off. Next, we stay on the topic of Chinese money, but hone in on the CCP's influx of money into American colleges. We explore why the U.S. universities are still so attractive to Chinese academics, and why CCP influence in the American academic system is such a dangerous national security threat. Finally, we close with a reflective moment on the Chinese accomplishments in the Paris Olympic Games, but detail how the shadow of past and current doping scandals looms over the medals earned. Okay, good to see you again, Miles.
Good to see you again, Phil.
We're going to jump right in per usual. So our first story is about Chinese millionaires and why they are fleeing the mainland. Miles, can you give us just a introduction into what is causing this exodus of wealthy individuals from China?
Well, there are the long-term causes, there are short-term causes. Long-term causes, obviously, is this great escape is a result of this fundamental clash of two systems, capitalist system and the communist system. So because of China's connection with the global free trade system, so part of the population in China could really get rich. I mean, they have gotten rich in spite of the Chinese Communist Party, not because of the Communist Party. So once you have wealth in China, and then that wealth really cannot really exist peacefully within the communist system. So the first thing after you make money in China is try to get out. So that's basically a systemic reason why there has always been a capital flight, as we call it. And there's nothing right now, nothing like right now. All of a sudden, there's a problem. I mean, that's one reason why China has one of the most strictest rules of capital exit control. They really have this very stringent measures to restrict money flowing out. China right now, official policy has always been that each individual can only take $50,000 each year out of China. That's the maximum. So if you want to buy a house, say it costs $500,000 somewhere, it'll take you years just to get that done. So that's why when there is opportunity, all kinds of ingenious ways were created to get the money out of China. And that's one of the most important things to have. I mean, for example, the last wave of capital flight took place in 2015 and 2016. That's when the Chinese government devalued its currency, the yuan, and the people just freaked out because that means their money inside China would be worth less. So you have hundreds of billions of dollars flying out of China. So currently, of course, there's another wave. It has something to do with the worsening of Chinese economy and the upcoming global elections in the United States in particular. So that's why there is a panic almost. You see this current exodus of wealthy Chinese to the West, United States and Japan in particular.
And I want to get to why them in particular. But first, you said people are making money, but they aren't able to keep their money in peace. Is it mainly because of volatility of markets, or is there something that the party is doing to make sure that people don't have full control over their money, or what's the story there?
I just lay out the underlying condition for China to get out of it, right? Everybody wants to go. But there is this, you also asked about the immediate causes of the current panic. It has something to do with the Xi Jinping's policies recently. Xi Jinping, since last year, started talking about redistribution of wealth, what he called 共同富裕. That means common prosperity. And the whole government right now is clamping down on private enterprises, non-state enterprise companies. And also, they try all sorts of ways to extract the money from wealthy individuals. The local government were broke right now. So that's why if you have money inside China, even the middle class feel very, very unsafe, and they want to get out of there.
Gotcha.
In the old days, in the 80s, it was the party slogan is, to be rich is glorious. Now, today, 2024, the proper way to describe the wealthy people in China is, to be rich is glorious and dangerous. That's why they want to get out. The fundamental problem is that China does not have constitutionally guaranteed property rights. It's a communist country. Mm-hmm. There is a theoretical denial of all kinds of private ownership. That's why people feel unsafe. It's based on the whims of the party leadership and the Communist Party. Whenever the government is broke and they go they go after the people at the bottom and then middle.
Yeah.
Capital flight has become China's national pastime. and in particular, you have this collapse of real estate. In the past, if you have money in China, you invest in two things. One is stock market, but most of them, about 80% of the family savings, were put into real estate in China, because that's kind of a Ponzi scheme people are living on, get excited about, addicted to. Now, China's real estate has collapsed almost completely. So wealthy people, they like to invest something with whatever money they have left in real estate. That still is good. I mean, you can see real estate in Tokyo, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in New York. They're very good. Therefore, they like to get the money out of China and go to those places.
Yeah. So you mentioned the U.S. and Japan in particular. Is that the reason why, or is there more here? I can probably guess a little bit, but why those places in particular?
Well, I think real estate is very stable in those places, and real estate, because of a high interest rate, real estate market has slowed down in the United States. So there's a bigger inventory, and people from China, they don't really go to the bank for money. They have cash, so they buy it. And in places like Japan, the Japanese yen right now has devalued quite a bit, so things are pretty cheap. Yeah. So that's why if you go to Tokyo today, you will see a lot of Chinese, not necessarily super rich, but middle class, and they bought a lot of real properties in Tokyo and the suburbs of Tokyo, because they're really cheap compared to many places in China, like Shanghai or Beijing. So you see a lot of Chinese over there. I think the number, I think about 50% of the new immigrants in Japan are from China. Another reason in Japan in particular is because Japan had this terrible aging problem. So they have labor shortage. So in recent 5-6 years, Japan is notorious for its strict immigration policy, but they have relaxed a lot of immigration policy to attract foreign laborers. And this is one reason why a lot of Chinese go to Japan and with relative ease in recent years. And the United States, of course, but there's also a fundamental reason, though, much bigger reason. That is, if you have money in China, not much, just the middle class get by, and in places like Shanghai, you have children. You don't want your children be subjected to communist, stringent indoctrination. All those nonsense that's going on by the propaganda machine. So you want your children have a really good, solid education. Yeah. And this is one of the most important motivations for Chinese families, middle-income families, and the middle class and wealthy people to send their children abroad. Where do they send to? The best education system is in the United States. Yeah. Despite all those flaws that people are talking about how bad we are. But it's still there's some kind of the ideal destination for education. Yeah. But then if you go even deeper, if you are a wealthy person in China, you are still living in a very precarious political situation. Right. Life without dignity. That's what happened. You have fear. And lack of basic human rights and freedom, I think, is the ultimate reason for people with decent wherewithals to get out of China. And so the U.S. is always the beacon of freedom and democracy. So that's why the United States has always been the top destination for the Chinese people, rich and poor. Yeah. Japan is second because Japan has particular appeal. That is, it's an Asian country. It's very safe in Japan. It has a very good social welfare system. So there you go. I mean, that's how that explains the recent great escape from China.
How are they doing it? You talk about the CCP has a limitation on money that can go out. There's no way they want all this money and investment going to Japan and going to the U.S. Chinese and Japanese relations are tense, and so you see all this immigration over there. How are they getting around the government and pulling this off without retribution?
They have all kinds of illicit ways, legal or illegal.
Right.
So last year, there are close to 14,000 what the profession called high net worth individuals, the HNWIs. They left China. Most of them came to the United States and Canada. So how did they get out? Well, many of the people who have money, they're actually sort of illicit money, the minor officials, and they have ways. They can basically, that's why bribery and corruption is rampant in China. You can always get away. And there's another ways to do it. I mean, I know a guy who, I heard of the guy, I don't know this gentleman, and he started a company in the United States. He would go to the court to have some kind of frivolous lawsuit, and he would manage to lose the case because the case is bound to lose. And then the court imposed a huge fine on him, and he basically used the money from his home company back in China to pay the fine.
Huh.
That's how you transfer money. Of course, the numbers can be a little bit different. He might say, hey, listen, even though I'm fined like $2 million, he said I'm fined $5 million. So then the difference of $3 million, he would legally get out of China. There are all sorts of ways over there. And also, some countries like Singapore has very close ties with Chinese government. So there are funds, Temasek, for example, a lot of illicit money would go there. I mean, they can easily do it. And with this sort of electronic transfer payment system right now, you can basically, transfer some money, using credit cards, and even Alipay to transfer money gradually. There are many ways to do so. Specifically, I don't know. I think the U.S. Treasury probably knows a lot about.
Well, I'm sure it's a mixture of all those things, and they're getting more and more creative. But moving on, we're going to stay on the topic of Chinese money going international, but now a little bit more focused, specifically CCP money into American college campuses. This is a topic that has been around for a while. I think we've touched on the show a few times. But Miles, why are U.S. college and universities so attractive to Chinese students and the CCP in general? Why do they care about it so much? I mean, you previewed it a little bit, that it still kind of has this allure, but what's behind it on your end?
Well, there is, of course, the American college university system is the envy of the world. People want to come over here. On top of that, this also is related to a grand strategy of the Chinese Communist Party from way back. So Chinese communist system cannot produce top-notch university and colleges because it lacks academic freedom. And academic freedom is the bedrock for innovation and creativity. That's why U.S. system is so good, education system. The Chinese Communist government knows this. In order to modernize the communist system, they need talented people, trained. They cannot be trained in the Chinese system. So from the late 1970s, the Chinese Communist Party has carried out the strategy that is to outsource higher education to the United States, to let the U.S. universities, the best in the world, to train engineers for the Chinese system. That's why China has carried out this very ambitious program. between 1978 and 2019, over the 40-year span, China has sent to the United States, to American university campuses, over 6.5 million Chinese students. And those students are trained. In 2020, the Chinese Ministry of Education did a survey. They concluded close to 90% of the students trained by universities and campuses in the United States returned to China. The actual percentage is about 86%. After they graduate from U.S. campus or university, they went back. It is this large number of American-trained engineers, mathematicians, chemical engineers, and all the sort of talented people that are running the Chinese Communist state machine. And this is basically the Chinese strategy. If you go to China right now, in all the key industries, key technological areas, the leading figures are almost without any question graduate from the U.S. university colleges. As we speak today, 2024, there were over 300,000 Chinese students studying on American campuses.
Yeah.
Today, 2024. That comes for about 35 to 40% of the entire student body, international student body in the United States. It's pretty telling.
Wow.
So
yeah.
Part of this is a Chinese grand strategy. Now, if you say, well, other countries have sent students to the United States too. India is close second. They have sent millions of students to the United States over the years. But only 20% of the Indian students studying in the United States have returned to India. Most of them stay in the United States. And that's why you go to Silicon Valley. Many of the industry leaders were Indians, not Chinese, because the best of the Chinese students, they have gone home to serve the communist country. Now, the Senator Cotton's letter to the Department of Justice to investigate Chinese money on American campuses, because in order to accommodate this huge number of students body in the United States, China needs the cooperation from the campuses, from the universities, and to grease some of the procedures, to issue visas, to issue invitations, to admit more of them. And in many cases, they try to corrupt American institutions to allow China's influence campaigns to operate on the campuses, like Confucius Institute, for example.
Right.
To allow Chinese consulate officials to influence Chinese student bodies on campuses. And that's why there's huge amount of money of corruption gone to the U.S. University campuses. I mean, in many cases, they were unreported. During the Trump administration, the Trump Department of Education had discovered over $1.3 billion of Chinese money went to university unreported, as required by law. And some of the universities, like Stanford University, was found in egregious violation of this reporting process. That's why Stanford University was fined over $1.5 million for that kind of misdeed. Georgia Tech was the same thing. Harvard, MIT, they all have this problem. So the Chinese money is rampant. They're corrupting, and this has to stop.
What does China do differently, like for your example with India, to retain such a high percentage of their students to come back? How do they prevent their students from, the poisoning of academic free thought while they're here?
Not everyone is allowed to go abroad in China.
Yeah.
Because China had this exit control. They can decide who should get the passport or not. Mm-hmm. Even you have a passport, you have a U.S. visa to come, China has this thing called the exit visa. So they can still deny you from going abroad. So you already have, been subjected to the control of the Chinese Communist Party, and they make sure that you have some liability inside China. Your parents.
So they're kind of filtering for loyalty on the front end.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And also, many of the students who were sent to the United States, they already have some kind of government connections. For example, the so-called 7 Sons of National Defense institutions. They're related to a so-called Project 985, and they were pre-filtered by the government for their eligibility to go abroad. But to answer your question directly, once those Chinese students come to the United States, to American campuses, the land is free. They were subject to stringent Chinese government control. One of the most effective ones is called the CSSA, the Chinese Student Scholars Associations. There are over 200 of them all across America, American university and campuses. Those CSSAs, almost all of them, were under control by the education divisions of Chinese consulates across the United States. For example, University of Maryland CSSA is being exposed as controlled by the Chinese consulate. Confucius Institutes, they were all across American campuses until just recently. American professors must abide by Chinese law, including speech codes. There is a Southwest Chinese Students and Scholars Association.
Jeez.
Yes, there is a Southwest Students and Scholars Association, and that basically covers these dozens of schools in Southwest United States, including Los Angeles area, including Arizona, New Mexico. And in their charter, it says this organization is funded by the Chinese consulate in LA, and its contact information is listed as that of the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles. It's just amazing. And of course, in this most critical area where there are some kind of very sensitive American research labs, you have the very strong Chinese Students and Scholars Association. Very odd. One example is the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Knoxville is right next to Oak Ridge National Lab. That's where American nuclear bombs were made, right? So you got this huge CSSS in University of Tennessee in Knoxville. In its charter, is openly stated. This chapter of Chinese Students and Scholars Association at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville accepts the leadership and guidance of the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. And it also says that it is funded by the Chinese embassy. And it says that you must support one China principle. You must not say, support Taiwanese independence. And most importantly, even if you have joined American as American citizen, and you are still, if you love China, and you will be a member of this organization, and you must abide by the Chinese law. This is in Tennessee. It's absolutely bizarre. So it's an organization of coercion. And they reported on people with different thoughts to the Chinese embassy. So that all kind of things. Of course, there is also active recruitment on the American campuses. This is something called the 1,000 Talent Plan, 1,000 Talent Program. And so that's just a very, very important. Because China also controls all research opportunities in China. If you're a scholar, if you're a professor, you want to get tenure, you need to do some kind of research that can only be done in China. You have to accept Chinese condition to do research. And we talk about the Wuhan Institute of Virology, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's conducted some very sensitive research. At least 6 American universities and research labs had joint projects with the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Oof.
And so they targeted American academics in China and coerced them into committing treason. I'm talking about treason. There's one fellow several years ago called Glenn Duffy Shriver. He was a student in Shanghai in 2004. He was paid $70,000 by Chinese government for what the PRC refers to as a friendship, but it was really information Shriver procured during his time working as a U.S. Foreign Service officer within the State Department of State. This is just absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So we have FBI says Chinese academic espionage is estimated to cost America $225 to $650 billion every year. That's the American government estimate. You think about this. That's why this is a very serious issue. Congress must take action to stop this very dangerous commitment of academic exchange with China.
Yeah, that's a scary one. So we'll move on to our final topic. Sadly, the Olympics are over, so there's nothing on TV anymore. But in reflection of it, Miles, they tied the U.S. in gold count. So each had 40 golds. The U.S. had 126 medals. China came in second with 91. But we covered a little bit of their doping and cheating and scandals in the past. How does it overshadow the medal count this year, and did it impact any events in particular?
Well, let me first say congratulations to China for winning this many medals. Even though I don't feel particularly proud of China, but I feel that the state, I feel very proud about those individual athletes.
Yeah.
They did great.
Yeah.
Basically, as a result of the state system that supports and screening hundreds of thousands of people from childhood onward that go to the national team to train. Nevertheless, it is an amazing human accomplishment. So I think that's good.
Of course.
So, yeah. Secondly, because of state policies, there is always this shadow sort of haunting the Chinese athletes. No matter how great accomplishment individually they have reached, there's always this association with the lousy government that carry out all kinds of very insidious policies, one of which obviously is doping. Doping in a country like China is rarely an individual effort. It's related to state government policy. Now, which really brings me back to the two major dividends of the end of Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. China benefits from the collapse of the Soviet Union in many ways. Two of them is very important. One is China benefited from Ukraine. Ukraine becoming independent. Ukraine had an enormous amount of Russian-made modern weapons. So over the decades, since the collapse of Soviet Union, since Ukraine gained independence in 1991, Ukrainians alone were largely responsible for the modernization of Chinese weapon systems. Ukraine sold China at a fractional price of Russia would have charged to China basically all the major platforms of weapons, from aircraft carrier to landing craft, to missile system, to heavy bomber engines. Even today, you still have a lot of Ukrainians weapons experts working in China. The second dividend China has gotten from the collapse of the Soviet Union was East Germany swimming coaches. East Germany was the most notorious doping kingdom during the Cold War. So,
that's interesting.
East German coaches went to China after the Soviet Union collapsed, and they basically taught the Chinese how to dope. Now, this Chinese doping project started from the early 1980s when China began to return to the international sports arena, particularly the Olympics. In the 1990s, the Chinese doping scandals account for more than half of global doping incidents. And that's pretty amazing. So between 1990 and 1998, there were a total of 28 Chinese swimmers tested positive during international competition, including Olympics. In 1994, there is the massive Chinese doping incidents related to performance-enhancing drugs. In 1994, in Hiroshima Asian Games, 7 Chinese swimmers tested positive for illegal drugs.
Wow!
It's really is amazing. In 1994, China was forced to adopt a sort of regulation announcing the prohibition of using of performance-enhancing drugs. And last year, China also adopted some kind of national law adding a criminal punishment to that. But that's basically is a shifting of responsibility, as if all those doping incidents were done by individuals, not by the state-sponsored policy or action. It's just not very convincing. In 2016, in the Rio Olympics, in the 100-meter butterfly sort of swimming final, the Chinese swimmer, the lady, had this won gold. But then she was found immediately of using illegal drugs. His gold was basically taken away. I'm sorry, it's not gold. He ranked at number 4. He didn't get a medal, but she was found of using drugs. And then she was banned from swimming for a couple of years. And of course, one of the more notorious cases was China's star man swimmer, the guy by the name of Sun Yang. And in 2018, he was found of using drugs. And so he was imposed an 8-year ban from a competition. But then later on, the sentence was reduced. But nevertheless, this is still a huge scandal. In the case that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, when the Olympics just started in Paris, there was this 23 Chinese swimmers using illegal drugs, and they were found in violation of the law. But then WAPA allowed them to perform in the Tokyo Olympics. Not all of them, but about 1/3 of the Chinese national team were on the list of illegally using drugs. And this was a national scandal. China has not really officially reconciled with the international sports community. That's one reason why the Chinese swimming teams, even though they have achieved remarkable events in Paris, but they were looked at with suspicion, because once the nation has lost trust and credibility, and everybody suffers.
Yeah. To clarify, there were 11 of the 23 swimmers who failed the doping test in 2021 were set to compete in Paris. Yeah, that's wild. Well, thank you, Miles. On that note, we will wrap up. Appreciate your analysis as always, and we will see you next week.
Thank you very much, Phil, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of China Insider. I'd also like to thank our executive producer, Philip Hegseth, who works tirelessly and professionally behind the scenes for every episode to make sure we deliver the best quality podcast to you, the listeners. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word. For Chinese listeners, please check our monthly review and analysis episode in Chinese. We'll see you next time.